I'm Alpha, I'm 15 years old, I'm senior at Brooklyn International High School in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a student, a bike mechanic, a bike rider, and an advocate. I was born in Guinea on April 28, 1996. When I was growing up, I always felt like I was following orders. For instance, if my parents tell me to study, I will just study. If they tell me to sleep, I will sleep. But inside, I was inquisitive and always filled with wonders, wondering why and how. For example, I spent a lot of time finding pictures in clouds, and when I was 6 years old, I tried to open a television to see if there were people living inside. And that's the way it worked. I would wonder how things work and do whatever was necessary to find out and to find a way to understand. I grew up in a village called Labe. Where I come from, people rarely had cars. In fact, only 2 families in the entire village owned a car, and even a bicycle was a treasure. I remember being a young boy and watching my brothers and cousins and friends riding bikes. I saw men and women riding bikes to market and return with the basket full of fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, fish, and meat. Others would ride to work, and sometimes 1 or 2 extra people would catch a ride too. And I will never forget the old men with their old bicycle with the air pump always attached to the frame. They were always kind and would help the children when our tires needed air. Because there were so many bike mechanics, there were many bike shops and bicycles too. The bike shops were in the city and they were filled with small parts and tools. The shops had a beautiful particular smell, a smell of oil and grease and hard work. The fastest way to learn a bicycle in my village was to apprentice as a bike mechanic in a bike shop. As a child, I would watch people ride a bike, and I knew that someday I would ride a bike too. It was my cousin Bashir who told me that I would never know how to ride until I fell at least once. All right, you soon will find out it was right too, right? My cousin Bashir was 10 years old and I was 7. He was older and wiser, and despite his warnings, asked him to teach me anyway. Bashir had a blue single-speed bike. He lowered the seat, I steadied myself on the seat, he held the back of the seat, and he pushed me forward. And guess what? I fell. I fell, and eventually I rolled. I felt proud like I had accomplished something great until I realized I could not turn. I was a straight rider, and little by little, I learned my way on that bicycle in Labe. When I was a child, I had no idea that the newfound feeling of freedom that came along with learning how to ride a bike would become a feeling I would return to forever. Now I understand that riding a bike is like visiting an old friend, a friend who will never ask you where you have been, but will always tell you, I'm glad you are here. When I was 13 years old, my mother and I immigrated to Queens, New York. I was very excited to come to America. It was my first airplane ride, and I remember an incredible feeling in my stomach when the plane took off. I looked out the window and saw the vegetation turn to ocean and then eventually to city lights. That feeling in my stomach came back when we landed. And in a quiet way, it stayed with me for days. Soon I enrolled at Brooklyn International High School. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a high school comprised of only students from all over the world. We have students who speak different languages and from many countries. At Brooklyn International, we have 365 students from 48 countries and speaking around 25 languages. One of the unique qualities of the school is that all students during our junior year have to complete 150 hours of internship. Each student is placed on an internship site based on their interests. Some site might be an office on Wall Street, or a hospital, or a non-profit organization. Through internship, students learn practical skills and real-life experience. Communication, adaptability, and professionalism were the 3 goals of internship. And it was through my internship that I was first introduced to recycle a bicycle. As I mentioned earlier, I was part of a youth ambassador program that began in September of my junior year, and it lasted all the way until the following June. For 10 whole months, my classmate and I explored the planning and development of the Brooklyn Waterfront Greenway, which is a 40-mile pathway from pedestrians and cyclists that stretches from Sunset Park to Greenpoint, Brooklyn. One of the things that makes this pathway so interesting is that it's not owned by any one agency. As a result, many city agencies, organizations, elected officials, community residents, and other stakeholders must work together to create it. It seemed that the only way for all these groups to work together is to participate in a process. It was through this process that ideas were explored and decisions were made, though it wasn't always easy. In my program, we met with representatives from New York City Department of Transportation, Brooklyn Grid Initiative, also known as BGI, and Brooklyn Bridge Park Conservancy, to name a few. We participated in a technical advisory committee meeting at Brooklyn Borough Hall. We helped to facilitate community visioning session with the Columbia Street Neighborhood Association. We created a public art that reflected our process, and we led a community bike ride to educate users of the Brooklyn Greenway about all that we learned. The Youth Ambassadors program at Recycle a Bicycle was also my introduction to advocacy. I learned that in order to develop complete street and infrastructure, there must be support. Thank you. Thank you for waiting. Last year, I participated in a panel discussion, just like Ms. Nidia said, called Our Changing Street with members of the DOT. And I then traveled to Washington, D.C. for my first life to attend the League of American Bicyclists National Bike Summit. What an experience it was. I learned so much and lobbied elected officials about policies that affected bicyclists. I also went on a bike ride to visit monuments. Whether it was funding for infrastructure or safe route to school, I had never really understood the process until that moment when I realized I was doing it myself. I also learned bike mechanics as part of my process. And as I began the mechanic segment of the program, I was reminded of the young, inquisitive boy inside of me, always asking what is inside and how does it work. And as I began to learn the steps to take a bike apart and put it back together, I couldn't help but remember the bike shop and bike mechanics in Guinea. I can say with certainty that as a young boy in Labe, I never could have imagined that I would have to travel all the way to New York City, the great metropolis of the United States, to apprentice in a bike shop with the beautiful aroma of oil and grease to build my own bike. Whether it was urban planning and advocacy or bike mechanics, I learned that things must start from somewhere, and I learned that things take time. I began to see everything around me in a new way, as if everything came to life and was suddenly possible. Learning that things start from somewhere helped me to demystify the world around me, and as a result, I was empowered to engage it and to create it. As I stand before you today at the Youth Bike Summit, I encourage you to look at the world around you and ask you not just what you wish to change, but how it is you wish to begin. If you are young, consider how others can be a resource for your ideas to come in fruition. If you are old, consider that young people may surprise you with our ideas and visions. Working together, because we must, we can get this bike revolution in motion. Thank you.